We're good. We're started. Austin, glad you're here. So we're moving from the Etruscans, who were the predecessors. We're moving from the Etruscans to the Romans, basically the next culture to emerge from the Italian peninsula. And so anyway, I just want to tell you, we're going to look at the Roman Empire, and the Romans were nomadic people. They didn't stay in one place. They just kind of moved all over. That's why they called them Romans. Just say it. Just kidding. Anyway, so yeah, centered on the city-state of Rome. We're basically a number of what we would call city-states, and city-states were how the Greek Empire was structured. And we had in Greece had two really main city-states, the Spartan city-state and the Athenian city-state. They kind of merged together. They did a lot of things that we saw. And I wanted to kind of say something about that. It was kind of an interesting marriage of two cultures when we talk about the Athenians and the Spartans. And the Spartans were predominantly, for a long time, more of the warrior culture. And the Athenians were more about knowledge, sophistication, refinement, beauty, the arts, and learning and things. And so they really complemented each other when they decided to be on the same side. And that is really what gave rise to Alexander the Great. He was a Spartan. And we still, I talk about the influence of the Greeks. And it occurred to me that we actually still use a lot of the symbolism and the mythology of the Spartan culture. And so, for instance, Michigan State University, you guys follow college sports? They are the Spartans, and they have this silhouette of an ancient Greek warrior on their helmets, and they are the Spartans. And the Spartans' enemy, city-state of Troy, University of Southern California, the Trojans, you see. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. It's just so many ways the cultures influence the modern day world. And likewise, we're going to find a lot of things in Roman culture that persist today. And among those things that persist to this day, their language, Latin. So what? Latin. Well, how many of you, do I have any nursing students in here? Evelyn, do you have to know some Latin in nursing?
Like roots, but not really.
Well, you all of these Latin root words, like say for instance, pneumonia, PNEU, that means air, right? And when you have pneumonia, you can't breathe. There's a lot of, actually, they use Latin terms, or they use the Latin language in medicine because it's a dead language. Other languages, especially the languages in use today, they evolve, they change. And English is growing exponentially. I remember back when I was your age, they would talk about the official English dictionary and they added new words like maybe 5 or something every year. Now it's an explosion. They can't keep up with the way that the English language is growing. And sometimes they have to invent words because they have new inventions. For example, let's say like the airplane. There was no such word for an airplane before the Wright brothers, you see. And so as culture, technology, science grows, the words grow. And in medicine, they use Latin, the dead language, because you can't grow it. Those meanings are fixed, and you can, and it does, as Evelyn was saying, you get the root words, and you can put this language together in all kinds of ways to describe all different kinds of medical conditions and physiological things. So anyway, we use the language of Rome. The Romans were pretty adept at defining their laws. Roman law, as it's said, is really the basis for much of Western civilization's laws. The idea is that, having, say, felonies versus misdemeanors, having punishment commensurate with the offense, the idea of a jury trial, all of that stuff. That comes out of Roman law, and it's evolved for a couple of millennia, but we still look to Roman law. And so, anyway, back to the map that I've shown you. This is really the part of the Italian peninsula that we're going to be looking at. And they have this inset, this cutaway, and we see here Herculaneum. Anybody here from Herculaneum? Jefferson County, anyway. Another one of those ancient places that has been, the name has been used to name places in Missouri and North America and around the world. So anyway, Herculaneum, and the big one here, Pompeii. What you got to know about the Italian peninsula, and you can see that on this map, is that it's particularly mountainous right through the middle of it. And on its western side, there's enough of a coastline and enough of a plain that they could build cities and grow crops and do all of the things that support the culture. And so Rome in the north, Pompeii in the south. And this is really the center of what we would consider to be Rome. And so here, want to take a look at this. I got a chat here. Okay, maybe I got you. This is a model. I gotta find it here. There it is. This is a model of city of Rome, and it's in the 4th century Common Era. And that's really kind of the height of the Roman Empire. And so this empire lasts like 450, 500 years. It's it's pretty lengthy, but I want to kind of point out a few things here. One, this is probably the most noted structure of ancient Rome, the Colosseum. And over here on number 2, this is the Circus Maximus. And we're going to take a look at that too. But I want to tell you a little bit about Circus Maximus, talking about things that persist over time. You can see this from the air. What do you think they did in the Circus Maximus here? You can see this is the entrance, and all around the sides are seats, and in the middle, Evelyn.
Track and field.
Sure looks like it, yeah. And if it were in Greece, that would be exactly. This is actually scaled up more, and it's for horse races and chariot races and stuff like that. So you're right, it's an old track and it's used for racing, just with horses. So yeah, this is a Roman day NASCAR, if you will, you know. And so that, and you see in the middle, just like you went down to Daytona Speedway or something, you have in the middle the places where the pit crew would be, for example. So Circus Maximus, we have let's see, a whole bunch of other things. So you can see here, just by how this is organized, that this is a city that was kind of built up over time. Why would I say that? Well, the streets aren't straight. Looks like there's no city planning here. And so that's kind of like St. Louis City, isn't it? You know, it's like these roads go all over the place, and that's kind of exactly how Rome evolved too. And so, like, you know, how many of you live in the city? Kind of not so much.
What do you mean in the city?
Within the city limits of St. Louis.
I live in Wildwood. Does that count?
No, that's a place, yes.
I live in Bridgeton, but I know the city pretty well.
Okay, good. Well, you know that those roads, you see a lot of intersections that are like wedge shaped. That's because there would be an existing road that wasn't really following a north-south axis. Those are the old roads that kind of wind and bend, kind of like some of these roads here. And so to put a north-south grid on it, it's kind of a real problem. And so that's a city that grew without really a whole lot of city planning. But if you go west, where the cities were developed more recently, because St. Louis goes back to 1764. If you go out west, you'll see a lot more cities that are on that north-south grid, and all of the blocks are rectangular or square. And so, yeah, this is Rome, and it took a long time to get there. In some cases, there are centuries between when some of these landmarks were built. And so let's take a look. Temple of Portunus, looking southwest. And do we have that on here? I didn't know if we did or not. Yeah, number 1, Temple of Portunus. So where can we find that? Way over there on the left. Yeah, absolutely. So you see, at one time that was really kind of the big center of things back 75 BCE. And so, yeah, that's the earliest ones, and it all kind of grows around that. But what I really want you to see about this is the influence of Greek architecture on this. And what does this look like? A mini Parthenon, a mini temple of Athena, Nike, or something from the Acropolis or other places in Greece. And so they even went so far as to use the Ionic order, that is the scroll shape on top of the columns. And so Temple of Vesta, Tivoli, Italy, 100 BCE. Same thing, except this has Corinthian order columns and metope. But there's something else behind here that I think is in some ways probably more important. And we talked about that a little bit with Etruscan architecture, the idea of an arch, an archway. That's an Etruscan Roman invention. And as I was saying, it's a better way to support weight over an expanse, over a place where there's a hole in the wall. Underneath this, there's no support for all of this. So you have to build something pretty strong. If you're doing a post and lintel, for example, like here, lintel, post, you can only support so much weight. The arch gives you the ability to build higher and stronger. Aerial view of the amphitheater, looking southeast in Pompeii, circa 70 BCE. Check this out. As I was saying, we got NASCAR. We got football and baseball here, probably more football, you know, but the idea of a big stadium to do important things and to entertain mass audiences. Yes.
Land in the center kind of reminds me of bread. Like how like bread is cut in the middle and it has that like white inside, and the around it the land is green, like if you dyed bread green.
Oh, yeah, it does have that illusion. And I would agree with that. That is what that looks like. And that's just really kind of an accident that a lot of this stuff had been grown over. And it's from Pompeii. And we're going to talk a lot about Pompeii here shortly. But we're still really, we're digging up Pompeii. We're digging up Pompeii from a volcanic eruption, Mount Vesuvius, that happened in year 79 AD. Here's a Palestrina, Italy, late 2nd century. So you can see they're incorporating both the arches and the columns, both Roman and Etruscan architecture. And this is like really pretty typical, but look how high this thing is. This is like, this is a restored view, by the way, but it's absolutely stunning. And in its own way, a lot more complicated or a lot more complex than the structures we see built by the Greeks, which were what we call hyperstyle, lots of columns, lots of post and lintel, pyramidal roof. That was kind of their contribution. The Romans took off with this. And if you want to know another part of the Roman legacy, I talked about the Athenians being cultured, the Spartans being warrior, the Romans builders. They were engineers. They invented so much. They really, it's really very impressive. And one of the things that they used a lot, it said that they invented this, and we don't have any good evidence to disprove that theory is that they invented concrete. The idea of putting limestone and aggregate and what else goes in there? At any rate, they built concrete, cement, the same thing that we use to build a lot of things like our interstate highways, concrete highways, buildings, everything. And it allowed them to, as they did then and still do, is to mix this stuff up. And it's based in lime, and lime is something you can pulverize it, you can make it into a powder, and you can add water to it. And when it dries really hard. And so that's why they use it, let's say like I-64 right outside here. This is all concrete. Concrete structures when they build bomb shelters and things, concrete. It's a Roman invention, and you can make things with it in all kinds of shapes. You can make a form of any kind, which is a form is another name for a mold, but you can shape it any way you like. And so it's really easy to work with, and it's really hard. It's very durable. And what they invent later is this idea of reinforced concrete, and that is that you like, maybe anybody ever do any concrete work here? See, I'm an old guy. I get all this stuff, you know. At one time or not, you ever heard of this stuff called rebar? Yeah, it's a basically a tube. It's a rod of steel, and you put it down in there, and it actually makes the concrete much more durable. And so anyway, I will talk about rebar, but that wasn't in the early days. It just, and here's another thing that the Romans did. They took that idea of an Etruscan archway, and they understood that, and so they started playing around with it. This is a simple, what they would call a barrel vault, and the vault really means the top roof of this structure. And so a simple archway, but deep, it's a vault, groin vault, two of them, they intersect in the middle. Fenestrated sequence of groin vaults. So you can see they're really starting to make this very complex. This is engineering at its finest. And finally, over here, the hemispherical dome, which hemisphere means half round. And that's another Latin thing, hemisphere. Sphere is a round object, hemin is half, just saying. Hemispherical dome with oculus. What the oculus is? Carter.
The Oculus Rift, that virtual reality thing.
See, that's another way Roman culture influences modern culture. Oculus, and it actually, why that goes like this, because we're talking about root words just a moment ago. It means eye. And this was quite literally the eye in the roof. And so the reason this was important was, first of all, that they made a dome. They figured that out. That's an engineering marvel in and of itself. But the idea of an oculus on top, that does a lot of things. One, it creates airflow. You're not inside this thing and suffocating, which could happen if there's no airflow. You need ventilation. And the other thing is, in the daytime, it lets in light. And they didn't really have a whole lot like light switches and stuff back then, you know, just say it. And so they could light this in the evening, the dark times, night, with torches. But what does smoke do? Smoke rises, goes out. So this works as a light source, ventilation, and a chimney. So it was really kind of a real practical thing. And so aerial view of the forum looking east, and this is Pompeii. And BCE 70 to 80 BCE to 79 CE. And I just talked about that. Mount Vesuvius blew up in the year 79 Common Era. And it just buried this city, Pompeii. And only in the 20th century they've been able to kind of start, they began to excavate this. And what this did was that all of that ash, all of that volcanic ash buried this actually pretty deep underground, but it served to preserve this city because it happened almost instantaneously. People didn't have time to evacuate. It's kind of interesting talking about natural disasters. Now they've got a hurricane in Florida, but see, natural disasters often happen just like that. Carter.
His name is Ian.
Ian.
Yeah, I think that's the hurricane's name.
Oh, yeah, it is. Absolutely. Hurricane Ian. My sisters and a lot of my family live in Florida, so we've been keeping a close eye. And so, let's see, do I got everybody? I'm sorry, I had to check this to make sure, Victor. Okay, I think we're good. Anyway, it happened so quickly that when they excavated it, they were finding the bodies of people trying to run away from the volcanic disaster, the downpour of all of this molten lava and ash and stuff. And kind of what, as I understand it, it was like the ash actually hit first, blown up, landed, and the volcanic lava went over the top of it. So it stayed sealed for a long time and it kept a lot of this stuff preserved. Peristyle, the house of Petit Pompeii. See, they all ended in 79 Common Era. But we had their whole house here. And in fact, we have parts of their paintings. We have their bird baths. We have an idea of what their gardens looked like, the pool, etc. And this was kind of like typical Roman houses for people of means. And you see here, that's another part of it. This is what that would look like in the center. There we go. You see the columns. Atrium of the house of Veti. So we see that they were actually, in a lot of ways, quite well to do. Here is, this is another slide from Pompeii. It says brought into Pompeii amphitheater, and the amphitheater is this part here. Like I say, they really did. The Greeks made theaters, and they were much smaller. Amphitheater, it's like amplified theater. It's like much bigger. And the other part of it is, it's typically acoustically balanced too. So the sound can travel without the use of without amplifiers and microphones and speakers and stuff like that. So anyway, here's a picture of the Pompeii amphitheater, and I'm gonna zoom in on this. And it's a brawl in the Pompeii amphitheater. And so this is really the same kind of thing that would have been going on in the Colosseum in Rome. And you can see people with swords, they're fighting. It's like WWE with weapons and a fight to the death kind of thing. You know, this is what they did. This was sport. But look out here. Look at these guys. This guy's on the ground. He's about ready. He's killing him. They're fighting over here. Looks like two guys killing this guy. What is it? This is like rioting in the streets. It's not just a brawl in the amphitheater. It's like all over the place. So, thinking about this, is there an analogy that could be made to today's world? A moral lesson, a meaning, a moral to this story. How about this? Throw this out there. If I'm totally wrong, you can boo. But I think I'm right with this, because how many times have you guys heard this one? And you guys being of the generation, the gaming generation, that believe that having violence in video games results in violence in the larger culture. Every time there's a mass shooting, they say, well, probably watched too many video games. You guys ever heard that before? I'm thinking that a lot. Good. I think this is really the same kind of statement, because the violence has increased in their entertainment sphere, that it actually spreads out into the street, and what we have is violence in the larger population. So anyway, that's just my take on it. That's just something I made up. But anyway, here we go. I want to show you this. This is Pompeii, and in essence, they discover more all the time. They dig deeper and deeper, and there's a lot of other things about the history of Pompeii. And so here we go. Let's the room of the slaves. Exceptionally well-preserved room forms a part of the villa within the area of Pompeii, where the ceremonial chariot and stable with harnessed horses were previously discovered. Latest discovery of a room used by slaves who worked in the villa. Slavery was part of the Roman culture. There's a passage in the Bible that says, slaves, obey your masters. Well, that's basically was the idea of turn the other cheek, Christian, nonviolent religion. But slaves, that's, the Egyptians had slaves. We know the Romans had slaves. And in fact, that was kind of one of the things that they did when they would conquer other territories and lands, that they would take some of the people and bring them back as slaves. And so anyway. And there's a lot of discussion, I might add, just to be fair, that a lot of people believe that the Egyptians had slaves, and certainly they must have, but it could be that slavery was not as predominant. And in Egypt, and I'm okay here, sculpture. And anyway, this is like I want to get this next one here because I thought this was not this one. And so yeah, we can see when talking about how this was buried all of a sudden, all these things, they're finding this stuff like plates still on the table. I mean, really, it happened just that quickly. And so they are discovering, they're discovering so much. And so, want to add a little something too. One of the more remarkable discoveries, I was just talking about Christianity and how that was outlawed in the first century Common Era for a couple of centuries in Rome. This was the first century Common Era, but they're finding in there these little hideaways, these places that were used for Christian prayer, and they find these crosses and stuff etched into the walls and things. So anyway, yeah, there was we know more about ourselves the more we learn about the past. And so here we go. This is in Nimes, France, and check this out. Beautiful Greek architecture, Corinthian style, and it is Roman. They copied Greek almost at every turn, the architecture to be sure. And the other part of this I just mentioned about the Romans conquering other lands, so we would call them countries at the time, but other lands, and they conquered Gaul, which is modern day France. They conquered what they call Britannia, which is the modern day UK. And in fact, they occupied ancient England for quite a while. And that there's a wall that really, and in fact, divides Scotland and England. It cuts right across the island. It's called Hadrian's Wall. There's still parts of it there. And that was about as far north as the Roman Empire could go. But on the other hand, all of the time, like it seems like almost every month, there's a new discovery in England of a Roman bath or a Roman mosaic or other Roman artifacts. So they were there, and their presence, they were there for quite a while. And everywhere they went, they built in France, in the Middle East, all over Europe. Everything they conquered, they built. And I wanted to get to this. This is like kind of the architectural wonder of ancient Rome. And you can see this is right at 16 BCE. So it's early in the Roman Republic, early in the Roman Empire, I should say. And anybody know what you call this thing? Carter.
A bridge.
Almost. It could be used as a bridge, but it's actually kind of narrow. It's called an aqueduct. Hey, we've got some more Latin words, aqua means water, duct means a passageway. Like the duct work up here, brings the hot air, the air conditioning. Ventilation. Aqueduct. And you know what this thing does? It brings water. I showed you the map of Italy, the Italian peninsula. And that map, those mountains go all the way up into Central Europe, the Alps. And there's this large portion of land that the Romans occupied just west of that mountainous area. But you can't really settle a place unless you have water. And if you take a look at the Mesopotamian culture, it was on the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. You need the water. That's the first requirement. The Egyptian culture, right on the Nile. You need the water. And so what we have here is the Romans wanted to occupy places where there was no really good source of water, a place that could not sustain a human population unless they had water, period. Why is it that Las Vegas, for instance, wasn't really a thing until after World War II? Well, they had Hoover Dam, created Lake Mead, they had electricity, they had water. They were able to funnel the water from the Colorado River. They were able to build Las Vegas and Phoenix, Arizona. Same thing. Those are places before that time, basically uninhabitable. And to the extent that they were habitable, it could only sustain a small population. But Phoenix is like huge now. They got water, you know. And so anyway, that was the same issue that the Romans faced. They had places they wanted to populate, didn't have water. So they built these things. And they extend, this is where it crosses a river. But this whole business, it extends way beyond either side of this photograph. And it goes for miles, tens of miles, hundreds of miles in some cases. And what they do is transport the water from those snow-capped mountains, the Alps, the mountains in central Italy, and so on. They catch the water and it runs through here. Up in each level of this, but especially that top level, that's like a mini canal. It's a trough, and it's set. This is how well they could engineer this. They figured out how to maintain a downward flow that really has to be only just a little bit more than 90 degrees. 90 degrees would make it flat and it wouldn't go anywhere, but they tilt it down a couple of degrees and figure out how to go from that place in the mountains to the place they wanted to water. And so that was the aqueduct, and the duct is really that part on top where the water flows. But and you can see they use their archways, and they had the engineering prowess to deliver water. Well, it wasn't always about populating remote areas that were arid. They also shipped a lot of water to their population centers. They have aqueducts that lead from the mountains to Rome. And they had so much water that they could just do all kinds of things, just like, oh, you've heard of the fountains in Rome, all of these great sculptures and the fountains they're built around the sculptures and stuff. It's because they had aqueducts. They actually had plumbing. They had sewage that ran the sewers underneath the city. It carried up waste out to the ocean. Wasn't exactly eco-friendly, but for 2,000 years ago, that was really quite an engineering feat. So this is like kind of the symbol of Egyptian, Roman architecture. And so there's a east side of the Porta Maggiore. Again, archways. They made a lot of commemorative portals and archways and these kinds of things. I showed you that with the Arc de Triomphe in France, the Germans coming through, the Americans. Anyway, the Domus Aurea of Nero, and Nero built this palace that's really quite remarkable. This is, you see, it's got the oculus, I should say, and it had these other places along the side that let in light, and dome, archways, everything. Colosseum. This showed you the amphitheater in Pompeii. This is circa 70 to 80 Common Era. Still exists today. And they're singing. How did they know we were in concert at the Coliseum? So anyway, I'm talking over this stuff, but bottom line, the arches and the concrete make this possible. And so one of the things that the Romans knew, and as I was saying about the Pompeii amphitheater, the idea was to keep people happy. One of the things that the Romans knew, and they learned this and were quite adept at being politicians. And by that, I mean that they were able to keep the population, the populace, happy. And so they gave them entertainment. It was a way to ensure that there would not be revolutions and uprisings and things if people felt like their lifestyle was just okay. And so to entertain the people of Rome, of all classes, by the way, he built this thing, and they originally call it the Flavian Amphitheater. And whoa, I was looking at this before, and I realized that I had one of these slides like way out of place, and it's around here somewhere. I know I got it. We see a lot of Roman stuff here. No, I thought I had a view of this from, there it is, the aerial view. See? Aerial view of the Colosseum. And I want to bring your attention to a couple of things. One is that the floor of the amphitheater, that place that Carter was talking about, that looked like a piece of bread, that is the floor of the amphitheater. Under Flavian's amphitheater, they had many chambers and rooms and all kinds of things going on down there. And in essence, what they would do is they would keep things down there, stage props to be sure, people to be sure. This is where they prepped the gladiators, was underneath there. Wild animals. They kept all kinds of things, and they would bring them from this spot under the playing field, if you will, and up. And what they would do with that, and I'm losing my, yeah, there it is. What they would do with that, with this space, at first it was basically, you know, kind of gladiator fights and other kinds of things. Like I said, the equivalent of boxing or mixed martial arts or WWE or something, basic combat. And as time went on, as they say about movies and things, they gradually get more and more grotesque over time. I got an example that I usually use about that phenomenon. How many of you, and there's probably none, but I'm just shooting, spitballing here, as they say. How many of you have ever seen the movie Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock? Black and white movie, 1959, Janet Leigh, Tony Perkins.
I've heard of Hitchcock, but not the movie.
Oh, okay. Emma.
That's the one where he has like the in the shower, right?
That's it, yes. Oh. Emma, she said, and quite correctly, that was like the scariest movie of its time. Like 70 years ago or 60 years ago, however long it's been. And it was the scariest movie. And you know what you saw? You saw a woman get into the shower, turn on the shower, water coming down, and then you see this hand, just like you described, with a knife coming down like that. You don't see her getting stabbed. The shot goes down to the drain, and you see what was supposedly her blood going down the drain, and she's screaming, and then she doesn't scream because she's deceased. But you don't see anything other than what was supposed to be the blood going down the drain and this hand. That was scary. And in fact, a lot of people just really, they protested this movie because they thought it was so grotesque, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing, since we had many films way before that that showed like Westerns where people shoot each other and stuff. But at any rate, that was scary. That was grotesque. And take that and compare that to a modern day slasher movie, you know, like a Saw or something. Changes, you know, what was grotesque in 1959 is not so much in 2022. And that's the same kind of thing that actually happened. So they wanted more, they wanted everything amped up, and they did some things, like they filled this place up in the middle with water. And they staged naval battles. They put two warships in there, and they fought it out, and they had naval battles in there. And at some point in the first century, they kind of figured this out. They were threatened by Christianity. Christianity was an outlawed religion, and they were capturing Christians, and they had an idea. We could kill metaphor, two birds with one stone. They could get rid of the Christians and entertain the people by feeding them, as they say, feed them to the lions. And they would quite literally put some Christians out there, and they let some hungry lions go after them and kill them. And so there are all kinds of stories about different people. One of Saint Ignatius, who actually was captured, put in there, and did nothing, and the lion wouldn't do anything to him. Saint Ignatius. Anyway, a lot of stories, but this is what this was used for. It was a way to kind of sort of keep the populace happy. And so we have here some Roman sculpture. Harder.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's kind of got a nasal issue here, but bottom line, Vespasian, 79 Common Era. And I hinted at this when we were looking at Etruscan art. We start to see more sculptures of real people rather than mythological figures. We saw in Greece a lot of Athenas and Hercules and stuff, or anonymous figures, but not, pointed to a specific person. A dying Gaul, for example, as a soldier from ancient France, wounded, bleeding out, but it's not a specific person. Romans kind of figured out a way. They decided that they would make their sculptures about people you would know, real people. That's kind of tricky sometimes too. You ever try to do portraits, you'll know what I mean. It's got to look like the person, or it's pointless. But you see here, this is Vespasian, Roman statesman, and he has all of the features, not, it's beautiful because it's truthful. I'll give you that, Carter. That is exactly right. This is much more naturalistic than anything we'd see previously. Now, the Egyptians, when they did their pharaohs, that was kind of a cross between God and emperor, powerful person, head of state. And so they, in the Egyptian culture, they were actually kind of both. Pharaoh was a god and a human ruler, if you will. These guys were just human. They didn't aspire to be gods of any kind. So when we see all of the Greek sculpture, the only time we even get close to having portraits of rulers, and we got a few times where there are some ancient Greek portraits, but one of them is on Greek coins, and they put the likeness of Alexander the Great on their coins in the Hellenistic period. But really, this becomes the idea of a portrait sculpture becomes very popular in ancient Rome. And so this is a Flavian woman, and so we don't know who she is. Spent a lot of time in the salon, don't you think? And so this is really kind of interesting. The idea that you could actually sculpt marble in this way to give all of those curls is actually, in a lot of ways, it's a technical issue. It's just really, really remarkable. But on the other hand, aside from the hairdo, you can see this is like so naturalistic. She looks like, I don't know how you feel about this, but I see it as she could almost start speaking. She really that lifelike, that naturalism that we that become one of the buzzwords. The Arch of Titus. And I show you the Arch of Triomphe. This is the granddaddy of all of that kind of architecture, and it really doesn't have any purpose except to commemorate the Roman emperor and all of his victories, his conquest, and so on. Here we go. And typically what happens, sometimes on the outside, we'll see some low relief sculpture, but typically that's all inside. the Arch of Trajan. You see here, these are all stories of Trajan's victories. And here they are. Triumphal Arch. I did this on Bing. They are all over the place. This is the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. You can see they have a chariot with a team of horses and everything. But, you know, there are variations on the theme, but we even have that sort of architecture in certain places in the US. And so our triumphal arch of Constantine, Arch de Triomphe, as I was showing you, Roman triumphal arch of Titus. That's this. So, apotheosis of Titus, a relief panel in the vault of the passageway, the Arch of Titus in Rome. This is what I was talking about. It's on the interior. The passageway is the way through it. And so we have this, and a lot of these things actually, in a lot of ways, could become really symbolic. And a lot of times they're adorned. Yeah, this is, how should I say this? One of the things that survives from this culture, and I think survives to this day, a lot of times when you start talking about prosperity and the bountifulness of a culture, a lot of times that shows up as sheaths of wheat. And that'll be used a lot in this kind of symbolism that we see. And so we see that a lot. We see that in church, for example. And it refers back to give us this day our daily bread. You got the sheaf of wheat. And so anyway, a lot of that kind of symbolism pervades the passageway of the Arch of Titus, Rome, spoils of Jerusalem, menorah, Jerusalem, even to this day, the center of Judaism, for some 3,000 or 4,000 years. And so anyway, this is his army, and they're bringing back all of this stuff, the spoils. It actually means looting, plundering, taking stuff that doesn't belong to you. And that's typically what they did. The Romans and other cultures before them, they didn't just defeat these territories militarily. They actually took a lot of stuff and brought it back home. And so, as I was saying, part of that treasure they would bring back might be slaves. And in a lot of times it was precious objects. And this menorah probably likely made out of gold. And so they didn't particularly care much about the religion, but they did like the fact that they could melt this down and make something else because it was a precious metal. So here is Titus in his victory parade. Got his horses, got all the people. See what they would do here. They would have young maidens in the front of the procession, and they would have baskets, say like flower petals and stuff. They would throw them out. And then the emperor would come, and with the emperor's attendants following close by. And what I can say about that is, if you're a Christian and you know about Palm Sunday, that's when Christ actually came back to Jerusalem. And he came in on a donkey, but they threw palms down. They didn't have the flower petals that an emperor would get, but it was still the same kind of sign of respect. They threw palm leaves down in front. And so in front of him as he entered the city. And so this is Timgad in Algeria, Northern Africa, and it's a place that the Romans conquered. And what I thought was so interesting about this, what I started talking about when I showed you the outline, the aerial view of ancient Rome, how it was just kind of evolved, and all the roads lead different kind of ways, creating all different strange shapes for the blocks and the places where buildings exist. This is city planning here. North-south axis, east-west axis. And you can see parts of the main functionary buildings here. And you can see this is likely residential area, but city planning. It's what the Romans did. They were engineers. They knew how to build things. They could build you a whole city if they wanted to. They could move water hundreds of miles so you could build it in an arid place. They could build great stadiums to keep people entertained. And not only did we see most of what they did in Rome and Pompeii, but they built all over the empire. And so we don't have a lot of evidence, actually evidence that we could photograph today, because subsequently people want those reminders of Roman conquest around. But you know, they would build things like hippodromes in some of the major cities. The Greeks did that as well, but not on a large scale. The Romans did it, and they did it on a large scale. They did it for a long time. And this is probably a good way to wrap up the thought about Romans and their engineering prowess. I said, I'll make sure, I think after architecture, I put the painting stuff together. Yeah, I got a little, Pantheon, 125 CE still exists. You can still go in this place. What's it? That's an obelisk. That's an Egyptian piece of sculpture. On top of it, a crucifix. Just saying, we'll talk more about that when we come back on Monday. I did notice too that there were a lot of people who could likely, I'm hoping, it was like 9 people that hadn't turned in quiz 2 yet. So please get on that if you haven't. And so, anybody know some good jokes? Well, I guess I gotta let you go. Have a good weekend. Finish this up if you haven't done so yet. And we'll talk about those nomads, the Romans. Anyway, just say it. They actually stayed.